Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Whole Life Podcast. I am Sherilyn Holloway.
And I'm Candace Conaway.
We're so glad that you can be here with us. It is Women's History Month, March 2024. We have an amazing guest. He's not a woman, but he has done so much in the space of fatherhood and those types of initiatives. And let me introduce Gary to you. He has been working with fathers and families in many capacities for over 20 years. Gary carries a bachelor's degree from East Carolina University in Family and Community Services, where he also has a four-year letterman attending on he was a four-year letterman attending on a full football scholarship. Gary also has a Master's of Arts degree in Christian Studies from Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Most of Gary's work has been working with fathers in crisis pregnancy situations. He worked in local pregnancy center and saw success in coaching and working with abortion-minded men. He then went on to work for a national organization training other organizations how to serve fathers in the same capacity. Gary now serves as the executive director of Major League Dad, a nonprofit he started to serve in a proactive role to promote, celebrate, and build phenomenal fathers. Gary has been married to the amazing Venice for 16 years, and they have two daughters, Soraya and Jordan. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for being here with us. We're really excited.
Thank you for
Yes.
having me. I appreciate that. You knocked that out the park, though, kind of working your way and navigating through that bio. That was nice right there. I like that.
Sure, the trick is read it before you have to say it.
Yeah, I picked up on that now. So thank you. Thank you for that tip. I know now.
Candace, with this being Women's History Month, we wanted to highlight. Um, so, can you go ahead and let us know some phenomenal women that we here at the Whole Life Project really kind of look up to and aspire to be?
Yes, absolutely. So the first woman we want to highlight is Fannie Lou Hamer. She was born in Mississippi in 1917. She became a community organizer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1962 and fought for civil rights, leading voting drives and relief efforts. She also defended the life of unborn children. Nanny Helen Burroughs. This is the second woman that we want to recognize and highlight. She was born in 1879, was the founder of National Training for Black Women in 1909. Women learned a variety of skills such as business, sewing, and printing. She advocated for civil rights for women and advocated for women to have the right to vote. And then lastly, we want to highlight a wonderful woman. Her name is Malala Yousafzai. She was born in 1997 and she became a Pakistan education activist. She became the youngest to earn a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. So those are the women that we want to highlight and recognize for this month. Then also shout out to my mom as well. Shout out
Yeah,
to
shout
her.
out moms, all moms,
Yes,
moms everywhere.
yes, yes,
Yes,
None of us would
absolutely.
be here without mom.
yes.
Absolutely.
Well, Gary, we have some questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned doing work in crisis pregnancy centers and
Mhm.
a large national organization in that space as well. How did you come into working in what would be considered a traditional pro-life movement?
Yeah. So I would say, just to kind of keep it as succinct as possible, is probably about, at this point, man, it was probably about 12 or 13 years ago. The church we were attending at the time, it was a predominantly Black church, kind of in a like in a hood space, to be honest, in the hood area. So one of the things I hadn't really, honestly, myself, I hadn't really heard about, abortion statistics or really that much. Um, and what was really interesting is our pastor, and he started talking about abortion, and he started talking about, specifically in the African American community. So what he ended up doing, there was a local pregnancy center. He invited the center to come, and then the executive director got up and she spoke, and she really started emphasizing the different zip codes in that area and how what the abortion rates looked like in these zip codes, and they were more geared towards African American areas. And that immediately kind of just sparked something in me. I didn't know what it was sparking, but something just kind of lit kind of like lit up in me. So that kind of went into, I was working in the youth ministry, and one of the after that service, one of the mothers of one of the guys that was in my group started volunteering at that pregnancy center, and then she came to me and was like, "Hey, they have this fatherhood coordinator position that was a grant through the National Fathers Initiative." So I was like, why would fathers be there? I really didn't see the connection at the time. But long story short, went interviewed, and it was the funniest interview ever because I showed up in my three-piece suit because I'm coming from black church, and we casket sharp and all those kind of sayings. But this little short white lady, and we're just sitting there looking at each other and didn't really know how the interview was supposed to go, but ended up saying, "Hey, we have this love for fathers and seeing men involved in this discussion and all that kind of stuff." So that was kind of my entry point in terms of what it looked like getting into like traditional pro-life work, being in a pregnancy center, and then what that looked like and how things kind of just how God started moving in my heart and seeing the need for men to understand their influence. And that's kind of like my biggest kind of point of what I learned over time. Just a guy being educated and being built in a way so that he knows his influence and being able to protect and support his girlfriend, wife, whoever, in that decision of abortion. So that was kind of like my entry point.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think men and fathers should be
Mm-hmm.
involved, men and or fathers should be involved in the abortion issue as a whole?
Yeah. Man, I have many, I won't say rabbit holes I can go down, but I think the main thing is for me is understanding the unit of the family, and God's ordained eternal equation, right? So father plus mother equals child, and just kind of seeing that, if you remove the father from that equation, and now you got to solve for X in a sense. So now you have this opportunity for society to solve for it, for community just have to solve for it, all this kind of stuff. So for me, it was really important to kind of see, man, like the influence that a father has, is her decision at the end of the day, but the influence that he has in helping for her to know that she has support, for her to know that someone is there, and then on top of that, what he brings in terms of the family unit to a child's life and the rearing of that child, I think is really important. So educating him on what she's going through or dealing with in terms of like the physical nature of abortion and all those things, just kind of seeing guys have an understanding of that, and then the light bulb coming on of like where they sit in this decision. I think that's major. So if we really want to say to me, this is just, if we say we want to care about women and care about celebrating Women's Month and all of these great things as men, then we have to be there to understand our influence in terms of how they're looking to us and how women they want us involved, but we can't be there and, to be honest, be idiots in terms of what it looks like to properly influence and have a healthy influence, and not just be there and have no clue. So I think that's really important in terms of the abortion issue as a whole, for men's influence and presence and involvement.
Yeah, and you mentioned something,
Mhm.
and for we did not. This is not on your bio, which I don't know why it's not, but are also at times a pastor.
Yes, and I didn't, because I'm not currently in the seat of a pastor, but I often act like one. I don't know, but I have been a pastor as well. I served on staffs and been in a pastorate role and all that good stuff. So yeah, how that didn't make it in my bio, my bad. But yes, ma'am, you're right. Correct. You're correct.
And so, well, can you tell us a little bit more about God's heart when it comes to the family union?
Yeah. So I mean, it goes honestly Genesis. Just the actual act of, I think about just the main story of Adam and Eve, and um, who God goes to, right? So this whole correlation of Eve eating the fruit, but at the same time Adam being there. So what was his purpose of being there? What was his thought process? I'm not trying to speculate into scripture, but at the same time, it's like a lot of us, and I would say when I say us pastors, we kind of overlook the importance of he was there. He the influence that he could have had, we don't know, but at the same time, the scriptures is the scriptures. So when the saying that the fruit is offered to Adam as well and all that good stuff. So then God comes back and he says, "Hey, Adam, what happened?" And I think that's something that, in terms of, that's really important because God gave the information, He gave the importance of man, woman, the union, all that kind of good stuff. He first gave it to Adam. So for him to relay that in a way that is loving to his wife Eve, it's kind of one of those things where it's like I started kind of digging into that just from the inception of the story of Adam and Eve. And it's like it just starts there. And then you just see a litany of different opportunities for men to step in. But whether they do or whether they mess it up or whatever the case may be, that's our job to see and not keep making the same mistakes and learning from scripture. So to take a story like that and break it down and to see where we kind of sit in the bigger story of God's unit of marriage, the institution of marriage, and then what that means for parenting as well. As a pastor, there's a lot of weight there, especially when it comes to the abortion issue, to not just let guys kind of not, well, yeah, to kind of slide by and, well, society says it's her decision. Well, you can be an influence to help her make this decision. And that's something where that kind of boils down to a lot of different factors, environmental and all that kind of stuff. But you have a role. So not to just think you don't have a role. That was one of the things that I used to see when I was in the pregnancy center is watching guys just kind of sitting there on their phone, sitting on the couch while she's in a room with the nurse, probably going through a lot of tough information, about to make one of the biggest decisions of her life. And it's like, as a pastor, that started breaking my heart because I'm like, who serves him so that he can, in a healthy and proper way, serve her? So I feel like a lot of pastors can actually enter through that realm of, hey, here's how you can be the influence, and here's what you need to work on, and here's how God has created this unit from the beginning. So I think that's really near and dear from a pastoral standpoint of how pastors can enter in so that we can't even escape from being in this situation or in this, conversation in a healthy way. So,
So is this something that Major League Dad does also? Do you guys do pastoral training?
so not currently. It's something that I've done more organizational trainings. So pregnancy centers, young life, working with young teenage fathers, stuff like that. But I haven't gotten really into that yet because, to be honest, just being a pastor, um, I know schedules and I know how you got to work through a lot of, I don't want to say semantics, but you have to work through some things when you're actually trying to deal with pastors and agendas and schedules and all that kind of good stuff. So it's something that I want to do, to be honest, because I feel like that'll help the conversation a lot more in a place where it should be a regular conversation because it deals with life, it deals with the family unit and all that kind of stuff. So we're working on it.
Yeah, I think that you have a really solid point that if the fathers aren't being led by anybody to see anything different, then it's
Yeah.
hard. You can't be in every pregnancy center or walking by that person on the couch. And I
Hmm.
know that think there's conversations from the pulpit, about the issue,
Yeah. Hmm.
involved. But it's almost like sometimes I feel like with men, it's different. Like I often feel like women are just like always like, yes, show me how, like show me how, teach me, show.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of times I feel like with men, it's like, no, this is the nature of my role is to like preach this from the
Yeah.
pulpit. And then like, but even if the pastoral training isn't necessarily like how to walk alongside someone, it could even be how to create uh train fathers in the church, right? Who
True.
to
Yeah.
older fathers in the church, fathers whose kids have, are now empty nesters to be able to go off and mentor in the church
Yeah.
and kind of spread out impact, I think would be really phenomenal. Because I mean, at this point, I feel like you probably could use just one more thing to do.
Yes, I could. Just tack that right on. Yeah, that'd be perfect, you know. That would be absolutely perfect. And just to round out my 26-hour days. That
I
would be
mean, what?
perfect, you know?
Listen, listen. God gives where it's needed. Um, you mentioned the abortion rate in your community in particular, and how that pregnancy center director showed by area code, and you were able to identify
Mm,
that the area codes being shown were predominantly Black neighborhoods.
mhm.
When did you learn that that's not an isolated thing, that that's actually nationwide? And
Yeah.
what was your reaction to that?
Yeah. So when I was working in the local center, and so I had my own personal like zip code stats, right? So what started happening was we started seeing success in terms of, and when I say success in meeting with guys, the success that we kind of warranted was, okay, how does he now understand his influence in the conversation with the young lady? So that's kind of how we framed it, right? So we started seeing more guys that were being educated and able to have the conversation. So then I started seeing other pregnancy centers from other places in the country starting to call in and like, hey, we're trying to do something with fathers too. How can, what are you guys doing? So then I kind of just personally was like, oh, okay. So like geographical matters, like the geography of where your center is matters. Um, so they started like, oh man. So then they were looking at their zip codes and then they were figuring out the same thing too. So I'm like, well, dang, I guess this is something that's like more nationwide in terms of what it looks like in these different areas geographically what it looked like for just the area that they're in, where most of their clientele was coming from. So for me, that's kind of how I started just organically seeing it. Because pregnancy center directors or the client services director would just get back to me and be like, oh man, yeah, we track this and yeah, we see this and we see this for this area and they're coming through this line. So this is where the nearest bus line is. So that's where this was coming from. And it was just like this correlation that was happening in different states, different pregnancy centers, and different geographical. Well, I would say the same type of geographical locations where the pregnancy center was at the time, and then that kind of grew when I got to the national scene of, man, this is way bigger than I think I even had a clue to. So that was something that was like really eye opening for me from the local standpoint, leading up to the national.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Standpoint.
This could be a very loaded question, but I want you to take your time answering it, and I
Yes,
want
ma'am.
take as much time answering as you need to.
Gotcha,
Um,
gotcha.
has your outreach to fathers changed since the overturning of Roe? Yes, it has, and why, or no, it hasn't, and why? Um,
Mm.
and in your state alone, how's the has the attitude of fathers changed since then?
Ooh, yes, that is a loaded question. So, first and foremost, for me, has my outreach changed in a sense? No. So, I would say before Roe, I was kind of already in this way of thinking or way of trying to go about things in this, what I would say, proactive aim of going after fathers, going after young men so that they can view, you know, crisis pregnancy abortion in a way that was, hey, you need to be involved because your influence matters, right? So then there's the reactive side of now you're in the pregnancy center, she's about to have this pregnancy test, and you still need to know, hey, guy, you need to be educated on this. Your influence matters, how you talk to her. So I was already kind of in that vein, but I personally just noticed more of the change that I noticed was I thought that was normal, just to be honest, but it wasn't for my area. So Raleigh, North Carolina, a lot of mega churches, a lot of 7-Eleven type. What I would say, I'm from Virginia, but a lot of 7-Eleven type situations, church on every corner. So it's kind of like now everybody's kind of reaching out. What do we do? And I just thought, like, man, if you're already in this way of the church serving your community, um, how you specifically go about serving, yes, we can come together and have questions and all that good stuff. But it kind of opened my eyes to who I would consider those who are in the pro-life or would say that they're pro-life, really kind of understanding that, hey, the opportunity and what's necessary to be visible and to be in people's lives has always been there, even before Roe. But at the same time, yes, now Roe is overturned. Um, Jumping into this still takes time because you have to actually be able to be willing to invest. And that was the one of the things I started seeing is like you really, and I say you as in a blanket, sorry, but it's like you really don't want to invest. You just see this as an opportunity to just, boom, we're just out the door now. Yeah, Roe's overturned. Woohoo. Okay, great. But now people in certain areas, if we go back to like the zip codes and the different places where most abortions may be happening, all that kind of stuff, a lot of them don't really see you. They don't really know you, church, um, mostly probably predominantly white, especially in our area. And it's like, okay, well, if you're not necessarily visible, I don't really care what you're talking about because you can bring a check and that's okay. But you don't really know me to help me change my environment, help me change my scenario, help me change my family status. Like you don't really care about that. So I take a little check, thank you, and just be on my way. And then the church, seeing the church kind of like the resistance from the community, from the church saying, hey, we're reaching out now. Like, you should be excited. Roe was overturned. They're like, hey, before Roe, we were already hurting. We were already going through a lot of these things. So now here you come. And it's like, okay, so that's supposed to change how I view you. And a lot of churches couldn't understand why they were being viewed that way because they were tying Roe being overturned to their involvement in the community, which didn't add up. So it's like, okay, you have to go back to the drawing board of what is your visibility in your community? Because obviously, if your church is missing, or let's just say your church disappears, nobody in your community misses you. So it's kind of like everybody comes to you, but nobody knows you in terms of your reach and how you serve people that are in situations, specifically abortion minded situations. Because a lot of pregnancy centers that were in the area, they were trying to connect to local churches, all that good stuff. But I think that was the dynamic that I saw that really still to this day kind of gets me. It's like if I do talk to a pastor and it's like, hey man, you know, we're out here trying to reach in this specific area. Okay, well, how long have you been going at it? Oh man, for about 5 months now. And I'm like, okay, so you're just getting started. And he's like, no, we've been out there, you know, hitting the pavement. I'm like, nah, because if your church has been here for 20 years, 30 years, that community across the street that you've never gone into. And I'm not lying. There's a church, very, very huge church, runs about 4 or 5 thousand a Sunday. And literally behind the church is Section 8 housing and like a hood little spot. Right behind, like you can walk down these little steps and go into the neighborhood. And that neighborhood had no idea who that church was. That church had been there for like 32, 33 years. So when I talked to the pastor about that, it was like oh my gosh. And he's been there for 32 years. He started the church. And I just thought that that was like so alarming because I felt like that was more of the norm um, of how I saw how churches viewed Roe being overturned and then how the community, specifically black and brown, how if they even knew about Roe v. being overturned, what that meant in terms of now here comes this church, I guess, showing up. Like, what does that even mean? I don't even know what's going on right now. So that dynamic to me speaks volumes to holes in discipleship, um, a lot of different things from a church perspective. But it also breeds a lot of opportunity if you're willing to invest and sit. Like just be still in the community, watch, listen, and hear what's going on, hear what need to be met versus assuming that you know it needs to be met and then throw either a check at it or throw a 1 day weekend serve at it and think you've done your due diligence. Like, nah, that's not it. So, I mean, even when I started Major League Dad, it was coming out of 2020. But at the same time, it's 2024 now, and it's now just some fathers now that I'm starting to see where it's like, okay, cool, we're cracking the code on some things, and even if they had a newborn, that child's 4 now, and it's like, okay, there's some growth there, there's some things happening, but you got to understand the investment, which I feel like a lot of churches, especially if they were really tied to a platform, didn't really either want, or they just thought that, hey, this Roe v. being overturned, everybody knows about it, is going to open up all these floodgates of opportunity. And you go to certain communities and they're like, bro, I don't care. It is what it is. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about half the time. So I think we have to kind of see that for what it is. So for me personally, and with Major League Dad and just kind of all that, like, no, we were out there before. But then afterwards, when everybody wants to come running, it's like, okay, but where you been? Like, that's always kind of been here, especially the abortion issue specifically. It's been here. So, um, yeah, I think, man, there's so much, especially from a pastoral sense, because it's like how to get people involved, how to get people thinking that way from the pulpit, involving different outside organizations like pregnancy centers who are doing that work and getting their heartbeat. What are they doing? How are they doing it? Versus just, yes, you hold a baby shower, and that's great. Don't get me wrong. I love that and what it can provide, but be in the community, actually sit in the environment where you're saying that you want to actually serve. And that didn't take Roe v. Wade in order to do that. But now at least it sparked something where I feel like if you feel like you need to do that, now we need like some more training or something on how do you actually do that. So yeah, it's a man, that's a crazy scenario because some pastors I talked to, I had to really bite my tongue to be like, they were mad that after, Roe v. Wade's overturned, like, why aren't they accepting us? What does that even mean, bro? Like, I don't understand the investment side that you're missing if we're saying we're following scripture and Matthew 28, right? The Great Commission and go into the nations and do therefore make disciples, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. Like, that means go. That means actually enter into and continuously, not just because something got overturned, but what does that look like to continuously invest in the communities on the edges, on the margins, versus just kind of this in-house reach that you're doing and then calling that outreach. So there's a difference. But Roe v. Wade had different hits on different communities. And I think being able to bring those different perspectives together still needs to happen more so that we can get more of an understanding of how to move forward. That makes sense. So yeah, I can ramble on that. But that's kind of where I would say Major League Dad was, I guess, and then kind of what I've just seen and still see just in our area here in Raleigh. So um, yeah, fun times.
And I think you touched on something that made me think about my own experience in
Hmm.
terms of acceptance in general.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
I think it's one of those things, and I know this is, more specific to, what I do and more specific to like what you actually, your actual work.
Hmm.
When you've been in this space for a while in pregnancy centers and with national organizations and people, vocalize how what you're doing is so necessary and it's so needed and
Hmm.
so glad you're doing it and or they're so glad that you're starting this thing
Yeah.
the thing gets started and everyone acts like they have no idea why you're here or that
Yeah.
like they don't
Yeah.
um they don't necessarily agree with the way you do everything. And so because they don't agree
Mm,
with the way you do everything, then it's kind of like, well, that's not the way I had imagined that thing would be done. And
yeah.
so I can't support or engage or have them come to, my organization and, teach or, help start a program or whatever, because it's not necessarily the way, like my pastor said this on Sunday, and that kind of made me think about this, and which is
Hmm.
probably the same pastor who doesn't understand why the community is not being so accepting. um, but
Oh, wait.
it makes me think of like this kind of false sense of entitlement that, I
Yeah.
just admit that I had, just because again, I felt called to do this thing that everyone was telling me was desperately needed. And I'm like, wow, the Lord is asking me to do it, not knowing that what people say and what people actually think and feel are two totally different things.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, having to uh reconcile that,
Yeah.
like, people aren't gonna like me.
Yeah.
I
That's a
don't
real
have
thing.
as much as, I think I have a meaningful and a message that everyone in the beginning told me was powerful and needed to be brought to the masses. It's people don't not everyone's going to, it's not for everybody. And
True.
it's not intended to be for everybody.
True.
I can
Yeah.
think of, just your situations where those pastors made some assumptions and
Yep.
had some entitlement to thinking, well, now I've been waiting for this moment to be able to do this thing because I felt like once this moment happened, this thing would be easier.
Right.
Um,
That's exactly what they thought. Or
and
think.
yeah, and it's not there. At no point in time is it easy.
Right.
Like, at no point in
Yeah.
time is something that is hard today going to be easier next year.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like there's no
Yeah.
doors that can be open. I've been, doing this work for 4 years now consecutively, and there's no doors that just fly open that are like, oh, that was easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The door may open easily, but once you step in it, you're like, oh, wait, there's real work in here. This is a mess.
Hey,
Like,
you say that
Yes.
you saying a whole lot right there. Oh man. Ooh wee.
like this is a stone cold mess in here. And I said I could
Yeah.
fix it. Like, what was I thinking?
Like I don't know what kind of cape I thought I was wearing when I thought I could walk through this door and
Right. Like,
save the whole whatever. Like
my
nah.
Lord, I'm
Mm.
quick. Like,
This is
and but I think
different.
that, the idea of, you were saying, you were talking about just even impact and how it looks different. And be when you're working with people and changing,
Hmm.
know, generational, um, I don't want to say curses, but just generational habits, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, changing the thought process, it is so hard to categorize. It's so hard to make
True.
into a number, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
really makes kind of saying like this is the impact that we've made really difficult to say, especially to like funders and
Ooh
people that
wee. Yeah.
would partner with you, because it's not like we served, 3,000 fathers this year and
Yeah.
gave six of them cars and got 20 of them jobs. Like it doesn't,
That's true.
it's because one, when you deal with people, it's over time. Like you said,
Yeah.
Mm.
5 months is not a lot of time. It's
Yeah.
when I have this conversation about even engaging in the Black community or with the Black church, like it's an
Hmm.
investment in time,
Yes.
before you
Heavy.
can
Yeah.
even see a return. And your return may not look like what you had hoped it would
They
look
hope
like.
to.
Not
Yeah.
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 in dollars. It may come in other, in other ways, but it is an investment in time. And if you do not have that time to do that, you're not going to see what you want. And,
Yeah.
just for you and your organization, I'm just curious, like, have you found that trying to um, quantify your work
Yeah.
in
Ooh.
numbers has been, a challenge?
Ooh. Huge challenge. And that's something that my board, we kind of sat down, and my board isn't necessarily, there's one guy that kind of knows about, the work I've been doing and working in abortion and pro-life space and stuff like that. But a lot of my board is, like one guy, he's a broker. Another, he's There's a young lady. She's a realtor. So it's kind of like because there's aspects of it that I saw in terms of what I needed, like affordable housing and you know just stuff like that that I wanted to have connections in. But I think the biggest part that I've just kind of seen, like I think, man, you hit on it so heavy in terms of the investment of time. Like that is just so that is open. My eyes have been opened even more in terms of just doing Major League Dad and not necessarily like when I was doing it for organizations, it was kind of like my time was filled for me. So it's kind of like waking up to a nice color coded calendar versus now it's like, okay, I see what this investment looks like with, you know, with AJ over here. And, but AJ has a litany of things that is involved in his story. And before we get to the fact that we want AJ to be as healthy as AJ can be so that he can be the best dad to his daughter, what needs to happen is AJ has to look in the mirror and get a lot of things, you know, going in the right direction per se. So even with our organization, it's kind of like that's taking time even for my board to kind of see. Like, you know, we can't just quantify it that way and say exactly what you said. We remember 3,000 dads gave away 20 cars, like, woohoo, and put that in a nice video at a dinner. Like, nah, that ain't what we're dealing with here. Like, it's some cats that's like, it's some heavy stuff going on. That there's investment, there's phone calls, texts, meetings outside of sessions, all kinds of stuff that just kind of you can't really quantify. But to talk about the impact is better. Who's it, Mother Teresa, to come and see thought process. Like you have to like be in this to kind of get it. So now that I can just say for my board, they've kind of come along. They've seen some of the sessions. They've sat in on some stuff. They've you know for permission wise, they sat in on some of the situations with the fathers, and now they're like, oh shoot, like we really didn't know. And I think that's more of the masses, the majority. Is like, you want me to quantify this impact, but man, that's really hard to do because you're dealing with, and I do say generational habits. So you're dealing with generational habits that have to be not only broken, but you have to build new ones. All of that takes time. So quantifying that, that's gonna be a little tough for your liking. And I'll say, to make it more specific, it's like, okay, I can talk about it, sounds great, you know, enduring testimony or something in front of the church, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, this takes time, and it could slow down and go slower because of that, or it could just mean more investment from a resource standpoint or whatever standpoint. So that's another thing that I feel like that you were hitting on that I see pastors seeing. It's like they want this return. And then I always say, hey, God's results are always the best results. So whatever results I go in with and God decides that the results need to look different, I've seen over time why his results are better than mine. So I'm okay with that. Now, if investors aren't, or churches or pastors or whatever, I don't really know what else to tell you. But you know, we see these investments and how God is moving in the hearts and in the minds and all that kind of good stuff. So just because it doesn't look like what you wanted it to look like when you wrote a check or something, so now you just feel a certain kind of way, and it's like, nah, here's what God is doing. Here's all I can present to you. And there's a change that's happening, and it's building different habits now for this generation. So um, I think that's actually a pet peeve of mine because um, a lot of churches that I even go to or you know trying to ask for just different funding and stuff like that. And then it's like they want straight numbers. And I have numbers to give you, but at the same time, here's this impact that's been made in this cul-de-sac of a community over the last 2.5 years. It's like, oh, okay, that's great. So how many of them have gotten saved? How many of them? And it's like, okay, slow down. So okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. It's okay. But yeah, that's tough, and I think that's more of a heart issue more so than anything else. And I mean that for a lot of pastors. I feel like that's a heart issue. You've been so used to your agendas and year-long, you know, efforts and all these different things that sometimes you can drift away from people. And that's actually the business we're in is dealing with people. So Yeah, that's rough.
Candace, did you have any additional questions for Gary?
Yes, I wanted to ask, how can people follow you, Gary, for those who are
Yeah,
interested in getting involved in your work?
cool. Yeah, you can so majorleaguedad.org. That's all just one big word, majorleaguedad.org. That's probably the easiest way because you can just shoot me an email that way. Or I can say my email is gfreeman@majorleaguedad.org. You can follow us on Instagram. It's major_league_dad. And you can follow us on Instagram. I do some videos that I do on that, try to kind of entail the work that we're trying to do. So I always encourage people to kind of get up there and just kind of see what's going on if that's something you want to view. But please shoot me an email because a lot of the work that we're trying to do, and that I'm actually trying to develop, because I think one of the things that's gotten interesting is more pull to do. Like I got scheduled to do a training for Young Lives. I think I mentioned that earlier, and that's kind of like way that's out of my scope. But now I'm seeing I got to change my scope a little bit. Then Sherilyn, as great as she is, hit on something that I actually been praying about in terms of this pastoral kind of aim, and just literally met with a Presbyterian church yesterday morning and talk through. They want me to come in and talk to their elders and do a training. So
Wow.
there's ways to enter into this where I'm just like, okay, cool. Just talking about this from a pure fatherhood perspective and influence that I feel like men can jump on and actually enter this challenge and not feel like they're on the wayside. So I say all that to say, please shoot me an email. That's the easiest way, and I can connect and we can go from there.
Was that all, Candace?
Yeah, I think that was it. Oh, yes, I do have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
What word of encouragement would you give to men out there who are, proactive within the pro-life movement and might feel discouraged? Like, what word of
Oh,
encouragement would you share?
yeah. Ooh, wait. I'm going to go back to something I mentioned earlier, but be willing to pray for and have this crock pot mentality. That's something that I actually embrace, and not just because I love to eat, but at the same time, I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of all the things that go into the different vegetables or different spices, or if you're trying to add the pot roast and all that kind of stuff. But even when you put it in there, it takes time for all of it to come together. So it can be frustrating because you can come down, you can, let's say, you come by it, you can smell it, and it's just like, oh, but it's not ready yet. That's okay. You know what's coming. So that's my encouragement to a lot of guys. It's like, man, I feel like if you can smell the aroma of the work that's being put in, the things that you're doing, just keep pushing and keep praying and trusting that God is going to make that thing ready, and just pray that your heart and that your capacity is ready to take it on, because like I said, God's results is always the best result. So have a crock pot theology. So it's not very, especially as a pastor, it's like, okay, cool. I'm not trying to do anything weird with that, but I just still feel like it's made sense for my own work in terms of what God has given me to do. So any guy out there that's in the work, man, be encouraged and just have that crock pot mentality about how you're going about it.
Amen. Amen.
Well, thank you, Gary, so much for spending this time with us. I really
Yes.
feel
Oh
like
yeah.
our male followers are going to love hearing from you and
Mm.
learning from you. And we hope that we can get you to write a couple op-eds or do a
Ooh,
couple
wait.
things for us on the more administrative side of things.
Ooh, wait. The fun stuff. Yeah.
My
Okay.
favorite.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. All the fun stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, you
Yeah.
all. My name is Sherilyn Holloway,
And I'm Candace Conaway.
and thank you for joining us on the Whole Life Podcast.
Bye.